I am a night bus driver. Every night, I meet a young guy with a briefcase taking this bus. The strange thing is, right before he gets off every day, he always tells me the same thing. He says, "You should leave early. No one is going to get on at this stop." I was half skeptical until one day I met someone else. There is a saying among the folks that the late-night bus does not necessarily only carry the living. I did not believe it before until I became a night bus driver. A few months ago, I was in a car accident and suffered severe head trauma, resulting in selective amnesia. I remember my hometown, my background, and my name, but I cannot remember how the accident happened. I only heard that the accident was very tragic. After being discharged from the hospital, I was anxious to find a job. I happened to pick up a recruitment flyer on the side of the road. It said Transit Express is hiring a bus driver for the night shift, running suburban routes with excellent pay. Coincidentally, my last job was also a bus driver. With the mindset of giving it a try, I called the recruiting company. As soon as I arrived at the interview location, my heart sank halfway. This transport company is located in the suburbs, in a very remote area. The mottled old walls were completely covered in ivy, mostly eroded by yellowed wastewater. A few buses were thrown sideways on the side of the road. The rusty doors were full of dents. I do not understand how these broken cars got their operating licenses. The supervisor in charge of recruitment is named Frank. He is around 40 years old, rigid in character and somewhat wooden. After the test drive, he was fairly satisfied with my performance. He pointed to the oldest and most broken 17-seat shuttle bus in the parking lot. He said, "After you join, you will drive this bus." Then he introduced the job details. He required me to start punctually at 10:30 every night, starting from the main terminal and ending at the Maplewood terminal. After parking and resting for 20 minutes, I am to return along the original route, and that counts as finishing the job. The monthly salary is $5,000, and the company helps pay for health insurance and a 401k. There will be a 1,000 bonus for the night shift. He asked if I was satisfied. I was more than satisfied. It felt like a dream. Walking into the office, I was full of joy and ready to sign the contract. But Frank stopped me for a moment. He said, "Liam, our company's rules are very strict. There are a few requirements you must keep in mind." I did not want to miss a unit with such good benefits, so I hurriedly nodded and told him to go ahead. First, you must be a virgin. During your employment, you are not allowed to date and you cannot touch women. I said I am a virgin and I am single. To be honest, I was a bit surprised. I thought he would first emphasize the rules and regulations with me, but I didn't expect it to be this kind of question. He said, "That is good." His brow relaxed a little. From the main terminal to Maplewood, there are 5 stops along the way. Unless it is a stop, you are not allowed to stop the vehicle. You must stay at each stop for exactly 3 minutes. Do you understand? I was stunned again. What if a passenger has mobility issues and needs me to wait a little longer? Frank shook his head. He said, "Do not worry about it, just do as I say." I said, "All right." He said, "The last point is, after midnight, you just drive back. No matter who flags your car down, you are not allowed to stop." After finishing in one breath, Frank reached out to grab his teacup. He said, "If you agree to these 3 points, we will sign the contract." I said, "Deal." I needed this job too much. Although I felt his words were a bit weird, I hastily went through the onboarding procedures. That afternoon, I moved into the staff dormitory. I took a short nap, and when it was 10 o'clock at night, I hurried to the departure point. This bus was even more broken than the one I test drove in the morning. The doors were loose, and there was a hole in the sheet metal. It would leak air while driving, and it could not be closed tightly at all. After checking the time, I started the bus punctually. The road conditions in the suburbs were very poor, and there was no street lighting. I did not dare to drive too fast. After driving for more than 10 minutes, I finally arrived at the first stop, Hollow Creek. A young guy holding a briefcase became my first passenger. This person looked very young, but his expression was extremely wooden. After getting on the bus, he went straight to the last row of seats without saying he was buying a ticket. I gave a friendly reminder, "Buddy, you haven't bought a ticket yet." He stopped his body and froze. That expression was like, he just found out taking a bus requires a ticket. After dawdling for a long time, he fumbled out a few quarters and handed them over. I felt this guy was weird and couldn't help but take a few more looks at him. He ignored me, directly leaned his head on the window after sitting down. His eyes went blank, staring blankly out the window. I guessed he might just be too tired from work. Making a living these days is not easy. This road was very bumpy. It took me half an hour to reach the second stop. Before the bus even came to a complete stop, the young man stood up, indicating he wanted to get off. Just as he was about to step out the door, he suddenly turned his head to me. He said, "You should leave early. No one is going to get on at this stop." I said, "It is fine. Company rules say we have to stop for 3 minutes at every station." I casually replied, and just as I wanted to ask how he knew no one was there, I turned my head and he had already walked far away. I muttered softly, "This guy walks really fast." I waited in place for a little while. It really turned out as the young man said. Not only was there no one at this stop, but there were also no passengers at the following stops. I didn't find it strange. After all, the road was too remote and it was very late. It was my first time running an unfamiliar road, so it was around 2 in the morning when I ran the route back and forth and returned to the company to hand over my shift. The next morning when I was buying breakfast, Frank took the initiative to find me. He asked me if my first day of work went smoothly. I said it was okay. I picked up one passenger, but he was a quiet person. He got on the bus and didn't even buy a ticket. I had to force him to buy it. Frank said, "It is fine. The company doesn't expect to make money on this route anyway, so it doesn't matter whether he buys one or not." It might have been an illusion, but I felt Frank's mouth twitch a little when he spoke. But he quickly returned to normal. Considering I needed this job, I didn't ask any more questions. The next day when I started the bus, I met that young man again. Just like the night before, he got on with his briefcase. He didn't mention buying a ticket and went straight to the last row. I remembered Frank's instructions, so I didn't rush him for money. When we arrived at the second stop, Willow Junction, he stood right up. He repeated the exact same thing he said yesterday. He said, "You should leave early. No one is going to get on at this stop." At first, I thought he was joking, but what happened later proved he was not lying. For a whole week, he was the only passenger I picked up. And every time, he only rode for one stop. Later, I told Frank about this. I half joked that this young man was like a fortune teller. His predictions were incredibly accurate. Frank's hand, which was holding out a cigarette, froze for a moment. He said, "Nonsense. How could there be no other passengers? It is just a coincidence." Sure enough, things changed the next day. I remember it very clearly. All the abnormal things started on my 8th day of work. That day, I dropped the young man off at the second stop as usual. I joked with him and asked, "Buddy, do you think anyone will get on my bus tonight?" He smiled and said, "Other than me, no one will get on your bus." After saying that, the guy just walked away. I waited for almost 3 minutes, and there was indeed no one. I felt a bit discouraged, wondering if this broken bus was added just for him alone. Before I could snap out of it, a thick man's voice suddenly came from behind. The voice said, "Driver, open the door, I want to get on." I turned my head to look. It was a bald, middle-aged man hitting the door. I smiled, thinking, who said there is no one? Isn't there someone here now? The bald guy seemed to be in a hurry. As soon as the door opened, he couldn't wait to squeeze in. He glanced at the spot where the young man had sat. His face turned pale, and his tone became very urgent. He said, "Driver, please drive away quickly. I have something urgent." But as soon as we drove away from that stop, the bald guy wasn't in a hurry anymore. He walked over to me to start a conversation. He asked, "Young man, is it your first time driving out?" I nodded and asked, "Yes, how did you know?" He smiled and said, "I ride this bus often, of course I know." The middle-aged man chuckled and handed me a cigarette. I didn't take it, just shook my head and smiled. I said, "I am sorry, smoking is not allowed in the carriage." He said, "I usually don't smoke either. I only take a puff when I get on this bus." He put the cigarette in his mouth and lowered his head to light it himself. I wanted to stop him, but then I thought about it. There was no one else in the carriage anyway, so let him smoke if he wants to. The bald guy was very talkative. While smoking, he chatted with me and asked if I felt bored driving alone. I said it is okay, and then I asked him what kind of work he does, taking the bus this late. He didn't answer, just smiled very mysteriously. By the time he finished smoking, I just happened to arrive at the third stop, Raven's Crossing. Right before getting off, this bald guy threw a cigarette to me. He said, "You should smoke it. It will help keep you awake on the road anyway. No one else is going to get on your bus." I took the cigarette, feeling a bit strange. The things these two passengers said were way too similar, weren't they? I waited in place for a bit, and sure enough, there was no one. I let out a bitter smile, shook my head, and started driving again. But just as I was about to drive out of the station, a woman quickly ran to the middle of the road. She was holding a child in her arms. She yelled, "Driver, please stop for a moment." This woman appeared too suddenly. The front of the bus almost hit her. I quickly stepped on the brakes, still in shock. I asked her, "Why are you stopping a bus while holding a child? Who would be responsible if something happened?" The woman got on the bus and kept apologizing to me. I said, "It is fine, just be careful next time." Seeing that her attitude was very sincere, I didn't dwell on it. I glanced at the child in her arms, and then I froze. The child was only 5 or 6 years old. He was wrapped very tightly in the woman's coat, with only half of his head exposed. I saw the child's forehead was a bit blue. And wearing so many clothes, I guessed he must have a high fever. So I asked an extra question, "Is the child's illness serious?" The woman didn't say a word and walked toward the back seat with the child. The little boy was lying on her shoulder, rolling his dark eyes. Suddenly he blinked at me and said, "Thank you, Uncle." He was clearly smiling at me, but his face was a ghastly blue-green color, indescribably bizarre. Out of politeness, I also smiled and said, "When you are sick you have to listen to your mom. Be a good boy, and you will get better soon." The little boy nodded. Then he added a sentence, "But Mom said my illness cannot be cured." I looked at the little boy's thin face. I thought, could it be a terminal illness? How pitiful. I continued driving and arrived at the main terminal in Maplewood. I parked the bus steadily and reminded the mother and son that it was time to get off. The woman said thank you and took the child off the bus. But not far away, she suddenly turned her head and smiled at me. That smile was quite seductive. My ears burned and I felt a bit embarrassed. After the run, I returned to the company to hand over my shift. I found Frank waiting for me on the parking lawn. As soon as I parked the car, he came right up to hand me a cigarette. He asked me how I felt after driving for the past few days. I said it is okay. I did not take his cigarette, but conveniently picked up the one left by the bald guy. I said, "Don't waste yours, I have one here." Looking at the cigarette in my hand, Frank froze. Then he looked at me with a strange expression. He asked me why I brought cigarettes on the road. I hurriedly explained, "No, I didn't bring this cigarette, it was left for me by a passenger." Halfway through my sentence, I stopped. This cigarette was not right. The filter was black, and the tobacco was damp. It emitted a deep smell of dirt, as if it had been buried underground for a long time. I brought it to my nose and sniffed it. A foul stench hit me, almost making me throw up. Frank saw it too, looking somewhat unnatural. He muttered softly, "Just throw away a moldy cigarette. Don't just take things from passengers in the future." I said, "Oh," and quickly threw away the cigarette, returning to the dorm to catch up on sleep. On the way, I couldn't stop wondering. That bald guy seemed quite honest. Why would he give me a damp cigarette? Could he be playing a trick on me on purpose? I didn't think too deeply about it, returned to the dorm and fell asleep immediately. Staying up late harms the body, this saying is true. Ever since I started driving this night bus, my energy has gotten a lot worse. I slept in a very daze this time, sleeping until the second half of the night, half asleep and half awake. I kept feeling as if there was an extra woman next to me. She even took the initiative to take off my pants. When I woke up the next day, I felt my pants were wet. I reached out to touch them, my face flushed red. I actually had a wet dream. I hurried out of bed and went to the bathroom to wash my underwear. Inadvertently looking in the mirror, I froze again. Is this still me? In the mirror, my forehead was a dark yellow, and my eye sockets were sunken in. I looked very haggard. While combing my hair, a handful of hair actually fell out. Because of this, I made a special trip to the hospital in the afternoon. The one who saw me was an old doctor. He asked me a few questions, and then asked me to extend my hand so he could check my pulse. While checking my pulse, the old doctor's expression suddenly became strange. He prescribed a few doses of medicine. Then he earnestly warned me, saying young people need to be temperate. I completely didn't understand the situation. It was just one wet dream. Logically, it shouldn't be like this. By the time I finished getting the medicine, it was almost 10 o'clock. I stuffed the medicine in my pocket and hurried to start the bus. But just as I ran to the front of the bus, I discovered something quite bizarre. Someone had burned a pile of spirit money in front of my bus. The spirit money was put in a fire pan and had already burned to ashes. Beside it were yellow incense candles, with the sparks flickering. At first glance, it was extremely creepy. I cursed, what bastard did this? I was furious, but looking at my watch, I almost didn't have enough time, so I had to let it go. Arriving at the first stop, the young man with the briefcase appeared on time. This time it was different from the past. When the young man got on the bus, he kept glancing at me sideways. His expression was weird, as if he had something to say but hesitated. Arriving at the second stop, he stood up to get off. He still muttered that sentence, "Don't wait, no one will get on at this stop." I laughed and said, "Don't joke around. Who said there is no one?" "Last night right after you got off, a middle-aged guy got on." "What middle-aged guy?" he asked. His hand holding the briefcase trembled a bit. He suddenly turned his head and stared at me with wide eyes. His eyeballs were very small. The whites of his eyes took up almost 2/3 of his eye sockets. It startled me into a shudder. I wiped my sweat and said, "No, just a normal middle-aged guy." He chuckled. He retracted his gaze and suddenly smiled. Out of nowhere, he asked a question. He didn't offer you a cigarette, did he? I was incredibly surprised. How did you know this too? Do not smoke it, he said. His expression was very playful. He scanned me, gave a cold smile, and turned to walk into the darkness. I stood there stunned for a long time. I kept feeling that the look in his eyes before he left had an indescribable meaning. Another 2 days passed, and the young man seemed to have disappeared. He didn't take my bus anymore. Without this regular customer, I was the only one on the whole route. In the middle of the night, it always felt creepy. Catching bad weather that day, it was drizzling outside. By the time I arrived at the Maplewood terminal, it was already past midnight. I remembered Frank said that as long as it was past midnight, I didn't need to pick up passengers. So I decided to turn around immediately. At this time, a woman holding a small umbrella walked to the station. Standing in the rain, she said, "Driver, please open the door." I looked over in a daze. It was the woman who had held the child before. But tonight she didn't have the child, she was alone. I looked at my watch, it was long past midnight. I was a bit troubled and said, "I am sorry, this bus doesn't take passengers after 12. She said, "Just make an exception. It is still raining. If you don't let me on, how can I get back?" The woman blinked, and her eyes were very alluring. I said, "All right." I hesitated and opened the door. After the woman got on the bus, I casually asked, "Where is your child?" She said, "He is hospitalized." The woman put her umbrella behind the door and spoke softly. I said, "Oh," and let out a sigh. It seemed the child was indeed very seriously ill. The road was slippery on a rainy day, and the car couldn't drive fast either. In the dark and bumpy carriage, there were only a man and a woman, making the atmosphere very subtle. Arriving at the place where she flagged the bus down last time, I voluntarily stopped the car. Who knew she had no intention of getting off. Instead, she walked up to me very coyly, blushing. She asked if I could lend her some money for an emergency. What? I was extremely surprised. What is our relationship that you would borrow money from me? Before I could refuse, she unbuttoned her top. Her tears fell patter, patter. She said, "Big brother, my child is very sick. If I can't gather the money, the hospital won't give him his Roman 4 drip." At that time, my head was buzzing. In the end, I still felt soft-hearted. I threw out $300 and sent the woman off the bus. The woman took the money and looked at me deeply. When she turned around, she gently left a sentence. She said, "You are a good person. Be careful of your supervisor." Huh. The sound of raindrops was too loud. I didn't hear clearly. I vaguely heard the word supervisor. Before I could confirm, the woman had already gotten off. What did she mean? To be honest, ever since I started driving this night bus, I felt that every passenger who appeared was very bizarre. But I couldn't explain exactly where the bizarreness lay. Driving on a rainy night was very dangerous. By the time I returned to the dorm, it was already past 3 in the morning. After taking a shower, I immediately lay back in bed. Half asleep and half awake, I started having wet dreams again. This time I saw clearly. The woman who actively flirted with me in the dream was the one who borrowed money from me yesterday. No surprise, when I got up the next day, I had another wet dream. I felt my heels were particularly soft. Looking in the mirror, I was even more haggard than before. I had an indescribable sense of weirdness in my heart. Both wet dreams happened after seeing this woman. Is it a coincidence? After washing up, I originally wanted to change my clothes. I found that the underwear from yesterday wasn't dry yet. I had no choice but to go commando and went downstairs to visit the supermarket. Passing the corridor, the old night watchman suddenly called out to me. He smiled and asked, "Kid, are you dating someone?" I was a bit confused and said, "No way." "Then why does your room make that kind of sound in the middle of the night?" he asked. The old night watchman didn't believe me, with a half-smiling expression. My heart skipped a beat, and I asked what sound. He said, young people." The old man outside the door smiled, very ambiguously. Shaking his head, he walked away by himself. The things that happened later started developing in a more bizarre direction. The woman appeared very frequently, and the frequency of my dreams was even higher. When we were on the bus, we had almost zero communication. She ignored me, and I never tried to talk to her either. But as long as I returned to the dorm, we would definitely meet in my dreams. Then we would kiss passionately. My mental state deteriorated day by day, yet I was immersed in it and couldn't pull myself out. Gradually, my physical condition got worse and worse, and I often zoned out while driving. Frank seemed to notice my changes. After handing over my shift that day, he took the initiative to find me. He asked me what was going on lately. I was embarrassed to speak clearly. I prevaricated a few times and said it was nothing. Frank didn't believe it. He stared straight into my eyes and said, "Liam, you are definitely hiding something from me." He said, "I heard from the old night watchman that there has been a lot of movement in your room these past few days. Have you forgotten the company's rules? I told you, you cannot touch women during your employment." Seeing that I couldn't hide it, I had to tell him the whole story. Who knew that after listening, he didn't say a word. He just silently lit a cigarette and took a deep drag. He muttered, "As long as you didn't really get into bed, your life force should still be strong." I asked, "What is wrong?" He said nothing. Frank seemed unwilling to talk in detail. He told me to pay attention to resting, and then found an excuse to leave. Watching his back as he left, I kept feeling that this old guy seemed to have left things unsaid. Sure enough, when I started the bus the next day, there was another pile of burnt spirit money in front of the bus. I once suspected that Frank might have burned this pile of spirit money. But when I called him to ask, he didn't admit it. Another few days passed. I drove the bus to the first stop. I was just too tired, so I rested my head on the steering wheel with my eyes closed. It wasn't until I heard footsteps from the door that I turned to look. It was actually the bald guy. I was very surprised and asked, "Why is it you?" Logically, the one who gets on at the first stop should be that young man. The bald guy smiled mysteriously. He said, "I came specifically to keep you company." These words stunned me. I shook my head and ignored him. I just treated it as a joke. When the bus drove towards the third stop, I saw that woman from far away again. I was just preparing to pull the bus over. The bald guy suddenly shouted, "Do not stop the vehicle." I felt puzzled and asked why. But the bald guy didn't explain. He grabbed the steering wheel, stepped one foot over, and stomped hard on the gas pedal. Before the bus could stop at the station, it rushed past with a whoosh. I was furious. I turned around and roared, "What are you doing? It is too dangerous." He glared at me and was even more agitated than I was. He said, "If you stop the bus now, it will be even more dangerous." Then he let go of the steering wheel and took out a cigarette to light for himself. He said, "If you see this woman again in the future, absolutely do not let her get on." I didn't understand the reason, so I asked him what he meant exactly. The bald guy said expressionlessly, "Didn't Frank tell you the situation?" Hearing his words, I froze again. I asked, "Do you know Frank?" He glanced at me and said, "Of course I know him. I was the previous driver of this bus. It was me who resigned first, and then you took the job. I I was even more surprised. I hurriedly asked, then why did you quit? He started to sneer again. He said, do you think this job is leisurely, pays well and has good benefits, so only an idiot would quit? I indeed had a similar thought. But I felt the bald guy definitely had a reason for quitting, so I stayed silent, looking forward to what he would say next. He said indignantly, because this is a hearse. What? My scalp tingled with horror, and I subconsciously stepped on the brakes. The bald guy panicked and quickly pressed my shoulder. He said, don't step on the brakes, keep driving. This bus cannot stop unless it's at a station. I asked, do you know this rule too? For him to say such a thing, it seemed he was undoubtedly my predecessor. I just didn't understand. Why would the bald guy randomly curse that this is a hearse? He said, you don't believe it, right? He took a fierce drag of his cigarette. His tone became gloomy. He said 2 years ago, this bus was involved in a major accident. It is said that the driver at that time had an argument with the supervisor over a trivial matter. He drank half a caddy of liquor before driving. By chance, he met a woman holding a child flagging the bus down. As a result, the driver was too drunk. He mistakenly stepped on the gas pedal instead of the brakes, and then caused a tragedy. I asked, what did you say? Hearing this, my scalp went numb, and all my hair stood on end. I remember it very clearly. The first time that woman flagged the bus down just now, she was also holding a child and appeared out of nowhere. The bald guy didn't care about my expression. With a pale face, he recounted the story. He said in the second month after the car crash, the first driver of this bus died inexplicably in a car crash. Then it was the second driver's turn. He drove for less than half a year and met the same fate. And then it was me. Speaking of this, the bald guy numbly pointed to himself. He said on his first day of work, he met that woman holding a child flagging the bus down. The road was quite normal. But as soon as he returned to the dorm, things started to become abnormal. The bald guy said as soon as he lay down, he dreamed of himself doing that kind of thing with the woman, and more than once. Later on, he felt his body getting worse and worse. Once when he was driving, he was too tired and actually fell asleep hugging the steering wheel. He almost caused a major accident. I didn't speak, but the twitching muscles on my face had already betrayed my inner fear. The experience the bald guy was recounting was simply a carbon copy of mine. Noticing the change in my expression, the bald guy coughed. He said later, I went to a temple to find a master to take a look. The master said the woman I dreamed of was the vengeful spirit who died in the car crash holding her own son back then. Her way of dying is called the vengeful mother and child. The resentment of the mother and son will always be attached to this bus. The mother will keep absorbing the driver's life force until she kills every driver of this bus. Listening to the bald guy's words, my head suddenly buzzed. I wished I could immediately throw away the steering wheel. But on second thought, I felt something was wrong. I turned my head to look at the bald guy. I asked then, why are you fine? He let out a bitter laugh and rolled up the sleeve on his left arm. Borrowing the dim light of the dashboard, I saw a centipede-shaped scar. It extended all the way from his elbow to his shoulder. He asked, look at me like this, do I look like I am fine? His cheeks were trembling. He smiled miserably and said anyone who gets on this bus will be cursed by her. You thought you got a good deal, but it is actually a death loop. I didn't speak. Only the hands gripping the steering wheel were trembling extremely violently. After a long silence, I said with a trembling voice, then how did you survive until now? He said, I naturally have my ways. The bald guy took the cigarette from the corner of his mouth. He said expressionlessly, "This box of cigarettes was made by a master I spent a lot of money to hire. The filter was soaked in black dog's blood. The tobacco was mixed with a lot of ashes from an old black cat. Ghosts are most afraid of this." I suddenly understood. I wondered why this bald guy would hand me a moldy cigarette. So this is where it came from. The bald guy glared at me very angrily. He said, "The first time I got on the bus, I gave you a cigarette. It was out of good intentions, wanting to use it to help you ward off disasters. As a result, you kid actually threw it away. You really don't know what's good for you." I was a bit annoyed, but mostly curious. I asked, "How did you know I threw the cigarette away?" He snorted. He said, "If that cigarette was still there, how could you have made yourself so weak? Don't think I don't know what you have experienced." Okay, my intestines were almost turning green with regret now. He said, "I will give you another one, take it well. This time absolutely do not lose it. Remember, keep the cigarette close to your body. When it is necessary, light the cigarette and take 2 puffs. Ghosts won't dare to get close to you then." Saying that, the bald guy once again pulled out a moldy cigarette from the box and handed it to me. I said, "Thank you." I took the cigarette, extremely grateful. He numbly waved his hand and said, "You are welcome. Who made us two suffer from the same illness? The station is just ahead, pull over. You continue driving tonight. I will come see you again in a few days." As we were talking, we had already reached the next station. I stopped the car, and the bald guy couldn't wait to walk down. I suddenly called out to him, "Bald guy." I hesitated to speak. He said, "Don't be afraid. As long as you continue to drive according to the rules, you will be fine. The cigarette I gave you will definitely help you. Whenever you feel uneasy, try taking a couple of puffs." I said with a trembling voice, "But what if I run out of cigarettes?" He said, "Don't worry, I will bring more for you next time." The bald guy turned his back and quickly got off the bus. Watching his retreating figure, I didn't snap out of it for a long time. I stared blankly at the moldy cigarette in my hand, feeling at a loss. Besides fear, I mostly had doubts. Doubts about the bald guy. If the woman was really a ghost, he should avoid her at all costs. Why would he get on the bus to tell me this instead? Was it just out of kindness? I couldn't figure it out. On the way back, I was like a frightened bird, wishing I could stick my chest to the steering wheel. Fortunately, nothing happened. Passing by that station from before, the woman had already disappeared. Returning to the company, I immediately ran towards Frank's office. As a veteran of this company, Frank definitely knew about the woman. I wanted to ask him for verification. But the office lights were off, and he wasn't there. I called him, but his phone was turned off too. Damn it! I was helpless and decided to return to the dorm first. Lying back on my bed, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned thinking about things. First I thought about the bald guy's words, then I thought about that mother and son. Unknowingly, a wave of sleepiness hit me, and I fell asleep in a daze. The next morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, I couldn't wait to run to find Frank. While changing my clothes, a detail made me feel very uneasy. The underwear in the closet was gone. During this time, I always had wet dreams. So I remembered the placement of my underwear very clearly. I clearly remembered putting it in the closet. The closet door was locked. It couldn't have been blown away by the wind. I also had the habit of locking the door when sleeping, so it was unlikely a thief broke in. Besides, what kind of petty thief would steal someone else's worn underwear? I just couldn't figure this out, no matter how hard I thought. During lunch, I ran to the cafeteria to block Frank. Without caring if he was willing or not, I dragged him directly back to the office. As soon as the door closed, I got straight to the point. I said, "Frank, did the bus I drive get into a major accident before?" Frank looked a bit confused and asked what accident. I got angry, grabbed his collar and roared. I said, "There are ghosts on that bus. Did you know I am being haunted by ghosts?" "What ghost?" Frank asked with wide eyes. He laughed dryly and said, "Are you joking?" I knew he would deny it. I immediately put on a stern face and said, "Last night, I met the previous driver of the night bus, and he told me everything." "Wait a minute," he said. Frank suddenly opened his mouth into an O shape. He asked, "What previous driver?" "Ever since that bus was bought, only two people have driven it. One is you and one is me. There is absolutely no third person." "What did you say?" This time, it was my turn to be dumbfounded. Seeing me like this, Frank patted my shoulder. He said, "Liam, is it because you haven't been resting well lately, so that's why?" I shook my head and stayed stunned for a long time. Then I said with a hoarse voice, "Has no one really driven that bus besides you and me?" "No one," he said. Frank said it very firmly. He said, "I also became a supervisor not long ago. Before you, that bus was always driven by me." "What exactly did you encounter? Can you tell me?" I nodded and repeated the bald guy's words verbatim. Before I could finish, Frank laughed. He said, "Ah, so it was him." I asked, "Why, do you know him?" Frank smiled and said, "I wouldn't say I know him. But when I used to drive that bus, I did see him a few times. This person has mental problems. Ever since his son had an accident, his spirit took a huge blow and he started acting crazy. You don't need to care about what he says." I looked completely confused and said, "Ah, so he actually had a son." "Of course he did," Frank nodded. "He said he was even a top student. It is just a pity his life was too short." I hurriedly asked what exactly happened. Frank hesitated for a long time before sighing. He said his son worked too hard and had a sudden heart attack on the way back, and then died suddenly. I was puzzled and said, "You and the bald guy aren't close. How do you know these things?" He said, "Of course I know. No one knows better than me how he died." Frank smiled bitterly. He said, "2 years ago, I was always the one driving the night bus. That night around 10:50, his son got on the bus at the first stop. Later he leaned on the window and fell asleep. He didn't wake up until I drove the bus to the terminal. When I realized something was wrong, the person was already cold." As he spoke, he pulled open his desk drawer. He rummaged out an old newspaper and handed it to me. He said the bald guy's son died in front of me, so I remember it very clearly, and I deliberately kept the newspaper from that year. I hurriedly took the newspaper and quickly unfolded it. But when I read the page reporting the sudden death case on the night bus, my mind went blank with shock. The photo published in the newspaper was actually that young man holding a briefcase. Why is it him? My fingers trembled continuously as I threw the old newspaper on the ground. I slumped back onto the sofa. "What is wrong?" Frank asked, looking at me somewhat confused. "Frank." My throat was trembling. I looked at Frank, trembling with fear, with a pale face. I asked, "Do you remember I told you before about the first passenger I picked up after I started working?" "I remember. It is the one who didn't have money to buy a ticket," Frank replied casually. My face was pale green as I said, "He looks exactly like the bald guy's son." "What the hell?" Frank said. Frank suddenly jumped even higher than me. 2 veins bulged on his forehead, and his face turned pale. He said, "This is impossible." "Yes, how could a person who died 2 years ago come to ride my night bus every few days?" I closed my eyes, and the terrifying experiences kept swirling in my mind. After a while, I opened my eyes to look at Frank. I said with a pale face, "Maybe I have been looking in the wrong direction all along. The woman and the child are not ghosts. The real ghost is the bald guy's son." "Liam, don't scare me," Frank said. A drop of cold sweat rolled down Frank's temple and dripped right onto his chin. He asked, "Are you sure you didn't see it wrong?" I didn't speak. I numbly turned around and walked out of the office. "What are you doing?" Frank chased to the door and grabbed my hand. I turned back and said, "I am going back to the dorm to sleep. Tonight I will drive the bus to the station and take a look." "Knowing it might be a ghost, you are still going?" Frank asked. Frank almost popped his eyes out staring. I closed my eyes, and my tone was extremely numb. I said, "First, I still can't be completely sure if this young man is a ghost or not. Maybe he just simply looks like him. Second, even if he really is a ghost, I must figure out why he wants to harm me. The last point is also the most important point. If there is a ghost that wants to harm me, where the hell can I escape to?" I decided to start the bus and go take a look. Maybe I can reason with the uncle's son. "Then I can only wish you good luck." Frank let go of my hand very unnaturally. His face had already turned as pale as paste. At 10:30 at night, I sat in the driver's seat again just like usual. With a plan to face death without flinching, I turned the car key. Then I ignited the engine. Even though every cell in my body was trembling with fear, I still smoothly drove the car to the first stop. Maybe it was a psychological effect. The moment the car door opened, I inexplicably felt a gust of cold air rush in. It rushed all the way from my bottom to the top of my head. The night was cool, with a layer of white fog floating around. It made the station look particularly gloomy. The young man hadn't come yet, so I decided to wait. No matter what, I had to make things clear. Waiting was undoubtedly a long torture. Helpless, I fixed my gaze on that cigarette. This cigarette was given to me by the bald guy last night. He said as long as I light this cigarette, ghosts won't be able to get close to me. Should I believe the words of a mental patient? After thinking twice, I still decided to light the cigarette, even if it was just for psychological comfort. Holding the cigarette in my mouth, I lowered my head to reach for the lighter. That was when the young man appeared. By the time I pulled the lighter out, he had already appeared at the edge of the station. He looked at me with a low expression. He said, "If you don't want to die, you better put the lighter down." The hand holding the lighter twitched frantically, almost dropping it on the ground. But when my nerves were terrified to the extreme, I gradually became numb. I directly said to him, "If you want to kill me, then kill me. Just stop scaring me, okay?" His expression had a bit of surprise. He said, "You won't die, as long as you don't light that cigarette." "What do you mean?" Before I could speak, the young man had already stepped onto the bus. He came in front of me and spoke with a cold expression. He said, "The one who wants to harm you is not me, but the person who gave you this cigarette." I was confused and said, "Impossible, stop lying to me." Seeing that I didn't believe him, he spoke faintly. He asked, "Have you ever heard of a ghost borrowing lifespan?" I looked completely blank and shook my head, saying I haven't heard of it. He said, "Before a ghost borrows lifespan, they will first find a person with compatible astrological signs. They will give him a cigarette and then borrow a light." The young man looked coldly at the lighter in my hand. He said, "This kind of cigarette can only be lit with your lifespan. When it burns out, your lifespan will also be exhausted." I asked, "So you are not here to harm me?" I was dumbfounded listening to this. I looked at the young man, then looked down at the cigarette, and my head started to ache. What the hell is this situation? The young man said, "Why would I want to harm you? Do you and I have a grudge?" I was speechless. Yes, even if a ghost wants to harm someone, they must find a reason, right? He really seemed to have no reason to harm me. My thoughts were all messed up. I stared blankly at him and forced a smile that was uglier than crying. I asked Big Brother, "Are you a human or a ghost?" He laughed and asked, "Who told you I am a ghost?" I swallowed hard and said it was Frank. He is the one who used to drive this night bus back then. The young man said, "If he says I am a ghost, does that mean I am a ghost?" The young man smiled faintly, his face full of teasing. I was already scared silly, holding my head in a breakdown. I said, "Big Brother, don't joke around. I have read the newspaper. The newspaper wrote that you died of a sudden heart attack 2 years ago." He said, "I do have a heart condition, but I didn't die." The corners of the young man's mouth curled up, always hanging a hint of mockery. He said, "After being sent to the hospital, I was lucky enough to be rescued. That newspaper only said a young man had a heart attack on the bus and was carried into the emergency room. It didn't say I had already passed away, did it?" I was dumbfounded. I looked up with a stunned expression. I asked, "Are you really not a ghost?" He was very impatient. He said, "I already told you, I am not a ghost. The one who gave you the cigarette is." I was dumbfounded. I said, "But this cigarette was given to me by the bald guy, your father." He said, "When he was alive, he was my father. After he died, he became a vengeful spirit seeking lives." The young man said coldly, "Before you, 2 drivers had already taken his cigarette." I said, "You are talking nonsense." I broke down to the extreme, jumped up, and said, "What evidence do you have to prove that the bald guy is a ghost? Tell me." The young man stared quietly at me. A few seconds later, he opened his briefcase. He took out a memorial portrait from inside and handed it to me. He said, "If you still don't believe it, you can come with me to his grave and see for yourself." "Ah, take it away, take it away." Looking at the bald guy's ghastly pale and gloomy face on the portrait, my brain was instantly struck by electricity. I wished I could stick my back to the windshield. That is right, this face was the bald guy's. So he is the real ghost. I was terribly scared. I suddenly felt the hand holding the cigarette itching a bit. I hurriedly threw the cigarette out the window and panted heavily while holding the steering wheel. The young man's eyes were filled with a terrifying flavor. He said, "He has already set his sights on you. He will come looking for you every morning after midnight. Only by staying on this night bus can he be unable to harm you." I asked, "Why can he not harm me as long as I stay on the bus?" My lips kept twitching. He said, "Ghosts are afraid of wicked people. They are especially afraid of the people who killed them. My father was hit and killed by this bus back then. He has no way to harm anyone on this bus. So that is why he goes through all this trouble, wanting to borrow your lifespan. The young man said, so after midnight, you just need to continue staying on the bus and you will be fine." "Thank you," I said with pale blue lips and a trembling voice. He said, "You are welcome. I just don't want to see him continue to commit sins." After saying that, the young man turned and got off the bus. As he stepped out of the door, he suddenly turned back again. He stared at me with a pair of cold eyes. He said, "Remember, you must keep driving the night bus forever. You have already jumped into this cursed loop. No matter where you run, the curse will follow you forever." His voice gradually drifted away. However, the terrifying shadow lingering under the night sky hit my heart over and over again. I said, "As long as I don't die, I will just keep driving." I accepted my fate. I struggled to climb back into the driver's seat. I mechanically started the car, letting the wheels turn slowly. I admit I am quite useless. In order to live, I am willing to endure all this suffering. At 2 in the morning, the bus returned to the transport company. The lights in Frank's office were already out. I looked at the dark windows, feeling extremely depressed inside. He actually didn't care about my life or death at all. He wouldn't even wait until I got off work. I didn't know why, but a strong sense of hatred towards Frank suddenly sprouted in my heart. If it wasn't for this old guy using a high salary to tempt me, how would I have fallen into this death loop? I even suspected that Frank spent money to hire me just to find a scapegoat. I cursed this bastard. Leaving behind a curse, I strode back to my rented room. No matter what, life has to continue. But just as I returned to the dorm, something even more surprising happened. The underwear that had disappeared before came back on its own. When I grabbed the underwear, a note immediately fell out from underneath. It read, "Do not trust anyone around you. They are all ghosts." Who handed me this note? In the whole company, only 2 people could open this door. One is me and the other is Frank. He is the supervisor and has a spare key. So this door could only have been opened by him. But thinking calmly, I felt it wasn't right. The person passing the note couldn't be Frank. If he had something to say, he could just call me directly. Secondly, this note also wafted a faint smell of perfume. I couldn't tell what brand it was, but it left a deep impression. Frank is a big, rough man who only smells of sweat. He couldn't possibly wear perfume. The smell of this perfume reminded me of a woman who had a relationship with me in my dreams. Was it her who came? I felt incredibly confused. She shouldn't know I live here. After being silent for more than 10 seconds, I immediately turned my head. I sprinted along the corridor. Arriving at the guardhouse, I pounded on the door frantically. I yelled, "Uncle, wake up quickly." The old night watchman cursed as he opened the door. He asked, "What are you howling for in the middle of the night? You don't sleep yourself, and you won't let others sleep either." I asked, "When did she go to my room? Where did she go?" I was so anxious that my speech was slurred. I shook the old night watchman's shoulders hard. He said, "Are you crazy?" The old night watchman blocked my hands and cursed. He said, "No one has been to your room. I have been guarding the guardhouse all day. I haven't even seen a single ghost." Was there no one? I was totally out of it, standing there in a daze not knowing what to do. The old night watchman asked, "Kid, do you have a fever?" Seeing me like this, the old night watchman kindly touched my forehead. He muttered to himself, "It doesn't feel hot." I said, "It is nothing, you go sleep." I didn't say a word. I turned around and headed straight upstairs. Returning to the dorm again, I slammed the door shut with a bang. I sat numbly for a long time. The note said to tell me not to trust anyone around me. This anyone must include the bald guy and the young man. So does it also include Frank? Things are not that simple. I have suspected the woman was a ghost. I have also suspected the bald guy was a ghost. Later, I even suspected the young man was a ghost. But I never suspected Frank. Sometimes, the most impossible person is often the most likely one. Not figuring it out is really too torturous. After daybreak, I immediately got up and went downstairs. I walked towards Frank's office. During the process, I passed by a small roadside shop. My heart moved, and I walked in to buy a folding knife. I tucked it into my belt buckle. Then I staked out outside Frank's office door. Just like usual, Frank went in and out of the office. He looked like there was no abnormality at all. I staked out until 6 in the afternoon. It wasn't until everyone had left, and Frank also took his lunchbox to the cafeteria. Only then did I carefully sneak into his office and lock the door. Searching around the office, I found nothing. I was just doubting if I was being too suspicious. But a flash in the corner of my eye suddenly fixed on the bottom drawer of his desk. There was a lock on the drawer, and it was sealed very tightly. My heart moved, and I directly went hands-on. I used the folding knife blade to pry open the lock cylinder. The moment I pulled open the drawer, a rush of cold air poured right into my head. I saw 6 dolls. They were neatly stacked in the drawer. Red threads were wrapped around the legs of every single doll. They were tied in dense dead knots. That thread connected all 6 dolls together. Secondly, the faces of the different dolls had vivid features drawn on them with a red pen. The features of the doll on the left looked at least 60 or 70% like me. Looking at the features of the second doll, it was that little boy. Continuing to shift my gaze, I also saw the woman, the bald guy's son, and Frank himself. Why were these dolls strung together? What exactly did this signify? I was dumbfounded. My crotch trembled, and I almost peed myself. I thought, it really is Frank. He is the mastermind. Coming to my senses, my heart was filled with extreme annoyance. Actually, I should have thought of it earlier. The person who hired me was Frank. That bus was assigned to me by him. Everything that happened on the road was his deliberate arrangement. It was a play he found people to act in together. Damn it! My face was iron blue. I hurriedly tore off the red thread on the dolls. I put away my own doll and strode down the stairs of the company. Until now, I still didn't understand what exactly Frank wanted to do. But my intuition was reminding me that I must leave here as soon as possible. However, just as I ran down the office building, Frank had already returned carrying his lunchbox. Looking at the doll tightly clenched in my hand, Frank immediately realized something. His face instantly became ferocious. Blocking the door, he roared, "You actually found out. Frank, you bastard." I was equally furious and cursed back. I said, "Why did you scheme against me?" "So it was you who was pulling the strings all along." He said, "Why, isn't this all caused by you?" Frank's face was as black as ink. His features were swollen green, like a fierce ghost. He said, "This hearse curse is entirely caused by you. As long as you didn't find the dolls, I could have left here." My anger soared to the sky. Gritting my teeth, I cursed angrily, "You are talking bullshit. What time is it now, and you are still talking to me about some hearse curse? These are all ghost stories you made up." He asked, "Do you think these are all fake?" Who knew Frank actually laughed. He laughed wildly with a ghastly face, twisting his features out of shape. He said, "This is the Avasai hell, you idiot. Do you still remember what you did before you lost your memory? It was you who harmed us. You are the real devil." I said, "No." I don't know why, but hearing these words made my head throb with intense pain. I subconsciously held my head. I couldn't remember what memory I had lost. I only felt my head was very heavy, and my consciousness was constantly falling. When I lifted my head again, I found that Frank had turned into a vicious, evil ghost. He bared his fangs and approached me step by step. He roared at me, "You murderer. It was you who caused the cause and effect of this death loop. Only when you have paid for all your sins will the Avasai hell automatically disappear." I said, "You are talking bullshit. You are talking bullshit." My brain hurt like it was going to split open. Countless broken memory fragments kept pouring into my mind. They squeezed the little bit of reason I had left into shattered pieces. I couldn't remember anything, but in a daze, it seemed I really did remember. It seemed I really had done bad things and killed people. I said, "My head hurts so much. I didn't kill anyone." I held my head in extreme pain. He said, "You are the real ghost. You are the one who should stay here." Frank jumped over and pounced on me with a ferocious face. I said, "Get lost." I dodged his pounce and pulled out the switchblade. I viciously stabbed it into his abdomen. He was stabbed in the abdomen and immediately bled profusely. He lay on the ground and shouted frantically. He said, "Ha ha, you killed me once again. Your sins are even deeper now." I said, "You forced me." I completely lost my reason. I kicked the bloody Frank away. I turned my head and ran towards the night bus. I clawed at the car door like crazy, trying to drive away and escape. A roar came from behind again, saying, "You cannot leave." It was that young man holding a briefcase. He turned green-faced with fangs. He hugged my arm and desperately pulled me towards the darkness. I said, "You go die too." I swung my hand back and slashed another cut. The folding knife squarely hit the young man's neck. Blood splattered, dyeing my eyes completely red. Then it was the bald guy. He grabbed a steel pipe to block my way. He ran while laughing ferociously. He asked Liam, "Do you feel all this is very familiar, haha?" "It is exactly the same as back then." I said, "Shut up." I couldn't listen to anything anymore. What they were saying was fundamentally unimportant to me. I only wanted to escape this place. I wanted to be as far away from these ghosts as possible. I sat in the driver's seat at the fastest speed. I started the car and drove crazily into the distance. The bald guy stumbled and stood in front of the car. He roared, "You cannot leave. If you have the guts, run over me again." I said, "I will satisfy you." I directly made up my mind and stepped the gas pedal to the bottom. I don't care if you are a human or a ghost. If you block my way, you have to die. Bang! With a muffled sound, the bald guy was directly sent flying by the front of the bus. He tumbled continuously in the air and fell into a pool of blood. Haha, good riddance, haha. I killed until my eyes were red. In a daze, I saw that woman holding a child again. She was rushing madly towards me. While running, she shouted, "Liam, I don't hate you, wait for me. I beg you to take us out of hell too. I wrote the note for you. I beg you to take me away too." I said, "You are a ghost just like them. Don't try to trick me." I stepped on the gas pedal again. I crushed everything that blocked my way. The frantic screams of the mother and son, and the crazy beating sound of the car engine hood. They were like the prologue of a massacre. Every syllable was beautiful and moving. I sped all the way, driving further and further, completely getting rid of them. I succeeded. I finally escaped from hell. I shouted crazily. I roared words that even I couldn't understand from my mouth. I opened my arms, extremely excited. Right at this time, a 12-wheel heavy truck drove head-on. There was no way to avoid it. Bang! The huge truck was like a savage beast. It viciously crushed the front of my car. The moment the front of the car shattered, I was also stunned by a huge force. My eyes went dark and I lost all consciousness. When I woke up again, I was on the operating table in the hospital. The doctor said it was a miracle to survive such a car crash. My brain suffered heavy trauma, and I might lose my memory. I remembered my hometown, my background, and my name. But I couldn't remember the specific details of that car accident. I only heard the doctor say that car crash was very tragic. During my recovery, I saw an old newspaper from 2 years ago from a fellow patient. It reported a tragic car accident on it. A passenger-carrying night bus and a large bus collided, and no one survived. After reading that report, my heart felt empty. I felt very strange, but I couldn't tell what it was. After being discharged from the hospital, I was anxious to find a job. I happened to pick up a recruitment flyer on the side of the road. It said Transit Express is hiring a bus driver for the night shift, running suburban routes with excellent pay. I dialed the phone number on the flyer. A wooden voice then sounded. It said, "Hello, my name is Frank. I am the supervisor of Transit Express. We are currently hiring a night bus driver. Are you interested?"